Everyone, if we're all set, I'm ready to begin here to open the November 18th Southampton Planning Board meeting. Right now we have all members in attendance except for Paul Fergal, who probably will log on at some point. If not, we have to proceed anyway. This meeting is recorded on Charter Cable Channel number 191. Our first order of business, I had to correct the agenda this morning after an email late yesterday afternoon. The first agenda item is going to be continued. I put canceled on the my town government site, but in fact, Greg Felton from 32 High Street, who had a continuance of a stormwater hearing tonight, has requested that the meeting be continued until December 2nd. His engineer had some health issues in the family and could not complete the plans or the requirements we requested to continue that hearing. So there's nothing that we can do tonight with that. So we'll revisit it again on December 2nd. That being said, the next agenda item has been moved up. Attorney Gary LaCourie is here for the folks from Gill Farm Estates off of Pequot Road. I believe, Gary, you have some other parties involved here tonight. Yeah,
I do. I have the three principal owners, Josephine Helios, Irene LaCourie, and Victor Bannell.
Is Randy Wilson here as well?
No, he's not. I just talked to him on the phone. He's en route back from a work project.
Okay. So, Gary, let us know what your intent is here tonight. Oh, by the way, Paul Fergal has joined us. Thank you. So we have a full board tonight. Gary,
yeah, my intent is, on behalf of Gill Farm Road Estates, is that we're past that November 15th deadline for paving. We're ready for the base coat for last week, but because the contractor couldn't make it to the site, we're past that date of the 15th. So in accordance with Mass Department of Transportation regs, we're asking the planning board to allow us to put down the base coat under certain circumstances, under the auspices of John Furman, the engineer, also. Obviously the Mass DOT regs call for at least 35 degrees minimum air temperature and minimum surface temperature of 40. We always like it a little bit more than that anyways. I'm not sure what Mr. Furman is going to go by, but we'd like to work with the planning board and get this base coat in. We thought we'd be done a lot earlier, but the pandemic has slowed down the construction industry and most industries, to be honest with you. But we'd like to get the base coat down for this project.
All right. At this time, I'm going to call upon John Furman, who has been the board's selection to be the inspector on this project through its fruition since its inception and approval by the planning board. So I'll ask John for his comment first, and then I'm going to follow up and ask Randall Kemp, the highway superintendent, to also comment. So John from VHB, please go ahead.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. The project has actually, kind of stumbled a little bit during the summer months. There was some time where there was actually nothing going on, and then when we started questioning on what was happening, activity started back up again. The equipment was brought back in, and they've been making pretty decent progress over the last month or so. Unfortunately, that time off kind of hurt them a little bit because now they're pushing up against that window. So to answer the question of Attorney LaCourie, we would just go by Mass DOT. We would not invent anything new as far as specifications go. And what he cited is correct. It's a 35-degree base temperature for intermediate course or base course with an air temperature of 40 degrees. Looking at the extended weather, I think Friday looks like probably the next opportunity to get that done. It looks like the temperature is going to be close to 60. So we're coming out of a 30 to 35 degree night. So by the time that that base warms up to somewhere close to 35 or so, it might be close to 10 o'clock during the day. So if we don't have an early start, I think we'll be okay with it. But, I think we're running out of daylight here. And if they want to at least get the binder down to stabilize it for the winter, that we should probably give them a shot.
Thank you, John. Randall, would you like to add any of your comments on this?
I'll keep it brief. John's got exactly what my concerns were. Minimum temp, surface temp, etc. And just ensuring that that's complied with so we get proper compaction.
Okay, and at this point then I'm going to defer to Paul Fergal and Keith Locke, two of our board engineers, to comment on this as well.
Yep, I'll go first. I'm involved in numerous Mass DOT projects throughout the year, and it's quite often that if weather allows that, that paving season, that paving cutoff of November 15th is typically extended up until the point you lose paving weather. So, if the plan is to try to get the base course down on Friday, which I agree, looking at the long range forecast, it seems like our next best available day to try to get this paved, then I would support that, provided that we're meeting proper ground and ambient temperature conditions.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree with what Keith and Randall and John said. I think the important component is the ambient and the base temperature rising is critical in the application. So as long as we meet those minimums and rising, I think we're okay to proceed.
Now, my only question is, and John, you can probably, or any one of the four previous speakers, say for instance, that can't be arranged for Friday. So where are we? Is it a definitive that it's going to be done on Friday?
We're on behalf of Gill Farm Road Estates, we're trying our best to get Andrick over there for Friday. It's a lot of projects are under the same timeline, more or less, to get the base coat down or get whatever coat has to go down. So it is a busy time of year for.
So we want to try and get some minutes approved.
We wouldn't do it on any weather time where it would be bad, and obviously it's got to be approved by Mr. Furman.
John?
Paul, there's a couple of things. We have to really look at the extended weather forecast. So, this week, it looks like Friday is the opportunity. I had talked with Jake from Andrick's on a project and talked about working the weekends if the weather was good. He said he really wasn't, geared up for that, but if it had to, they would do that. And I mentioned to him that we would just need to know in advance if it was going to look like that so that we could get coverage and get people out there to look at it. One thing I would suggest is if you look by the subdivision regulations, all testing is to be at the cost of the applicant. So I would strongly suggest that the board require that the asphalt binder be tested for compaction after it's put down. Per Mass DOT specs, it's got to be between 92.5% and 97.5% of the theoretical density that is calculated at the plant. So when the asphalt comes that day, if the asphalt's originating from Andrick's plant, he'll have what that theoretical density is. And that needs to be given to the testing agency. And then once it's through rolling, they can test it to see whether they've achieved it or not.
Okay. Did anyone check the base course density? Has that been done?
It has, Paul.
Yes.
I have all they took tests of the sub base the intermediate base and the base right below it. So I have copies of all those, and I copied them over to Paul.
Yeah,
And
I
they all
forwarded all that
exceeded,
to the planning board. Everybody has copies of those I sent in a previous email.
Yeah, they're all about 95 or better, so they compacted it really well.
Now, John, who will do the testing on that material?
Well, they had Allied doing the testing on the sub-base and the granular materials. Allied is capable of doing that same testing for the asphalt. We've used them on a number of projects, so I would assume that Randy will just contract with them and have them come out the day of the paving just to do those samples. And
that will be verified by you?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll go out there and instantaneously with their tests, they have a density gauge that they read right there. So you'll see right what they're doing as they're putting it down. So if they do a test and it comes out that they didn't meet the minimum requirements or it's not in that range, they just roll it over again with the roller a couple more times while it's still warm, and then they can pack it down. So it's a good check to make sure that we get what we need.
All right. Is the board satisfied with those conditions?
Yeah, I am. Just something else I want to mention for the benefit of some of the newer board members, and this is right out of our subdivision regulations, is that this base course or binder course that we're talking about, our regulations require that it needs to be in place for one winter before the final surface course can be placed. So it is important to try to get this application done before we lose weather this season, because otherwise, if it's not done, then top course on this project wouldn't be in theory until 2022. So yeah. Just a little bit of information for some of the newer board members.
Thank you. Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Cindy.
So Keith, I did read that in the subdivision bylaw. If for some reason this couldn't happen now because temperatures and scheduling didn't allow, but we ended up having like a January thaw, for lack of a better term, and there were 3 or 4 weeks of warm weather, which happens sometimes. Does the months that follow January become a winter and meet the criteria under that kind of a circumstance, or do they have to wait till?
I would say no. I would say there's going to be a couple factors at play. Most likely, the hot mix asphalt batch plants aren't going to be open anyway, so they wouldn't even get product. And it's. I would say no. That's not a possibility.
Yeah, the asphalt plants are probably going to be closed.
Yeah.
Do we need any other further information or any other comments from the board or other interested parties?
Paul, just one comment I would say is that if it doesn't happen this Friday, we would want to have, and it goes into next week, we would really want to know in advance of when they're going to put this down. So if they miss Friday and we're looking at, Wednesday of next week, they should make some predictions and let us know so that we can adjust accordingly. And by us, I mean the board through email.
Agreed.
Okay. I'll be in touch with Andrik immediately tomorrow, and we're going to try to get this moving.
And you'll copy John and the board on that, correct?
I will, absolutely.
Okay. Do I have a motion to extend the period for the binder course to go down at Pitch Farm Way?
Gill
I'm sorry, Gill Farm.
Gill Farm.
I was looking at Gielher.
He's an attractive guy.
You're lucky you can still see now.
So, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, with the condition that the project owner, project developer notify the board if changes to that schedule need to be made.
Motion's made by Keith. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is that Dan?
Paul.
Paul, sorry. All right, I have to take a roll call vote on this if there's no other questions. Keith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Cindy,
Aye.
Paul, aye. Okay, the motion's been approved, and please keep us posted, Attorney LaCory.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, and thank you for all the other parties from
Thank you.
Gill Farm.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Take care.
What do I do? You show me.
The next meeting, agenda item here tonight is a joint meeting with the Southampton Housing Authority. And at this time, I would like to ask Jim Sini to unmute himself and come aboard.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hi, Jim.
How are folks tonight?
Good, thank you. Is there anyone else from your committee present tonight?
I do have folks who I expect to join in. We have a total of 4 members. 1 is unable to attend tonight, and 2 are planning to join in around 7:30, 7:40. 1 is monitoring the proceedings on channel 191 and may jump in sooner.
Okay. And also tonight, Larry, did I see you somewhere? Larry Smith?
I saw him. I did.
I know.
He was here, disappeared.
He was there. Let me see if I can get him back.
So I guess my question is, on our agenda, do we say that this would start at 7:30 such that we should wait for your members to arrive?
I put it on the corrected version. If you read it, Dan, was 7:20 for the joint.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's passed. Okay.
Yeah. I feel I can speak for the housing authority.
I'm going to give, oh, there he is. Don't answer that call, Larry. I just called you. You were there and then you disappeared. Larry, can you hear me? He's coming in and out. He's connecting. Are you there, Larry? He's up in Leeds where that signal isn't that great sometimes.
You can't trust those Leeds people.
Are you from there?
Yes, sir. There's another board member of the Southampton Housing Authority, Janet Kane.
Janet Kane, welcome. Hey, you having trouble connecting? Well, you're in and out, and I saw you, then you left, and then you came back again, but there was still no audio. Down in your bottom left-hand corner of the screen where the audio.
Have you guys had a chance to work on any of the zoning bylaws recently in the last 6 months?
No, Ryan, we haven't been able to do that.
Okay.
He's on mute.
Paul, thank you for your kind words, by the way, earlier. It means a lot to me.
Okay, how about now?
Say again?
I said, how about now?
How about yes? Thank you.
Okay, very good.
All right, Larry, we've introduced Jim oops, you're gone again.
Here, hold on. Okay.
Okay, we've got Jim Sini up in the right middle corner there from the Southampton Housing Authority, as well as Janet Kane down in the bottom left of my screen. And also tonight we have Ryan Gielaher, who is a developer, but he's also a member of the ZBA, but I invited him tonight as a builder and a developer because we didn't have I felt if we had ZBA here, we would have to invite the entire board, but it's strictly for discussion purposes. So he doesn't have a ZBA hat on tonight. I hope he just has his builder hat on. So Jim, would you please, before I start though, I thought because this board met jointly with the select board last night, I'm going to ask Cindy Palmer, who worked on the Master Plan Implementation Committee. There's a section in there about affordable housing, about the survey that came back. And for those of you who weren't part of that or were aware of it, it was like 800 and I think it was just short of 900 responses, which was phenomenal for a town our size. And if she would just highlight some of the responses about affordable housing that the community might be interested in before we open a discussion about how to maybe address that problem going forward. So go ahead, Cindy.
Okay. Just get the view here. So right now I'm just going to show you a portion. First of all, can everybody hear me? Yeah, I think you can.
Yes.
I'm going to just show a portion of the PowerPoint presentation that was given to the Select Board and the Planning Board and the Master Plan Implementation Committee last evening at the Select Board meeting. It was a joint meeting. This one quickly is how do the residents believe Southampton should evolve by 2040. So 35.1% say a rural residential community with minimal commercial development. And the next most popular choice was a community of diverse housing options that balances commercial and residential growth with agriculture and open space. And then the next one was a bedroom community with dispersed small-scale commercial development along main roads. And the other two choices were the least popular. Moving on, housing. Based on your income level, are there sufficient housing options for you and your family in Southampton? And this was a pie chart graphics display. 83% said yes, they are finding their housing options sufficient for their family. 17% said no. And Paul is right. The response was about 809, well, it was specifically 896. Not everybody answered every question, so 873 answered that question. Then we had specific comments. And here's the yes, but, or the no, but. Yes, but it appears not enough. More options needed for senior assisted living and low to moderate income housing. Also, yes, but I think a lot of houses are not affordable to people in my age group. And yes, but we are older and established, but our children, as they move out of the house, probably won't be able to afford Southampton. The no's, but said, as a couple looking forward to retirement, we cannot afford to purchase a single level home in town on what our retirement income will be. And as someone with student loans, it's extremely difficult to find affordable housing in our town. No, we remodeled an older home that we wouldn't be able to purchase at its current value. And finally, no, I'm fine now, but if I need or want to move to something smaller, I probably could not do so. This one is really interesting. This is a graph that says if you were to move to another living situation within Southampton someday, what type of housing do you anticipate would meet your future needs? So the highest percentage is down here, and it's yellow up here, and it says, I don't anticipate requiring a different housing situation, and that represented 36.3% of the respondents. The next most popular, I'm sorry, this was the most popular, 37% said owning a house is what they'd really like to do, and the next one was, I don't anticipate changing. And then from there, a little smattering here in the teens. So 19.7% said they anticipate living in a 55 plus independent community. 17.8% said owning or renting a dwelling with everything on one floor. And down from there, 10.6% living in an assisted living / senior facility. And below that, owning a condo or cooperative unit. And then the smaller percentages represent the other options: renting a house, renting an apartment, not interested in remaining in town, and I guess owning or renting a unit in a duplex or townhouse. On a scale of 1 to 5, I would like to see the town provide affordable and accessible housing options by promoting development of. So let me think here. I think there's a, no. The first one, we'll just go through them one by one. Detached single-family homes. 3, it was the neutral choice. They didn't care either way. 23.9% strongly supported just maintaining detached single-family homes. And then number 4, in between the two, is 20.6%, so halfway between neutral and strongly support. Strongly opposes down here are kind of a small percentage of 17.2%. Of duplex homes, same, 29% were pretty neutral on this, and yet 21.3% strongly opposed to that. You can see the breakdown here. Townhouse and condos, again, neutral for, in this case, 28.3%, and a 20.9% oppose townhouse and condos, and then 14.7% strongly support it. Accessory apartments, neutral, 26.0%. A higher percentage are opposing accessory apartments, 27.4%. Conversion of single-family homes to multifamily housing units. Lower percentage of neutral, lower percent of strongly supporting, but then a pretty high percent, or considerably higher, 36.4%, strongly opposing the conversion of single-family homes. Tiny homes. I think I've seen those on the internet. I couldn't define exactly what they are, but I guess they're really like one room, I guess. And the breakdown is the opposition is 29.8%, and strongly supporting is only 16.5%. Apartment buildings, now this is interesting, 46.3% of the respondents strongly opposed the development of apartment buildings. Neutral was a much lower percentage, but people leaned very much towards the opposition. And finally, housing meeting ADA compliance. A higher percentage supporting it and neutral, so they sort of lean from neutral up to the supporting of that. Before I open this further discussion, or Paul continues with the discussion. No, I think we'll stop here. I do want to share with you, and maybe at the end of the housing discussion, we can share the various priorities that the respondents gave, but that they aren't specific to housing. So I'll stop on that now. Okay.
Thank you, Cindy. You want to switch off of that shared screen, please?
Yeah, I'll do my best to do that. I lost it. Where to go? Whoops.
Better you than me. I'd lose the whole meeting.
Wait a minute. Now, what do we got to do here? Oh, gosh. Where do I go to shared screen change here? I got to go.
That's my line.
No,
At the bottom center of your screen, Cindy.
Or top, I think it says stop sharing.
Oh, stop share. Thank you. I knew all you were. That was a test. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Jim.
Geez, I'm feeling better as we go along.
Yeah, I did that specifically for you, Paul. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Let's see here. So, Jim, piggybacking off of that survey, let me see what direction the Southampton Housing Authority wants to go in.
So, as a committee, we're a pretty new group to this. I've been doing it for maybe a couple of years, and I'm probably the senior member on the Housing Authority. So there's a lot of learning that we're doing. But I would say in a 30,000 foot level, what we're looking at doing is expanding. I think in addition to looking at creating affordable housing units for the town of Southampton, and by affordable, I mean the HUD definition of that. I think in addition to that, we would like to see for the town of Southampton an increased variation of housing price point availability in the town of Southampton. I and members of the Housing Authority worry about, frankly, the gentrification of Southampton, where the people who provide services to you and I, our police, our fire, our school teachers, our custodians, work at a rate where they can't afford to buy in Southampton. So, I worry about having a two-tiered society where the people who live here and the people who provide us with services don't live in our town, don't know our town, don't know us. They come here from elsewhere to work here. So increasing the price point availability of housing stock in Southampton, I think, is really important. And so I point to, this isn't a new concept. I point to the neighborhoods of Mountain View Circle, Lynn Drive, Karen Lane, as little neighborhoods that are established long ago, whose lot sizes are probably non-conforming lots at this point in time. Illegal neighborhood areas presently, but actually are fine, great neighborhoods for the citizens of this town. And the Housing Authority would like to see more neighborhoods like that available. We would like to give, through looking at zoning changes, maybe overlay districts, working with the planning board, give a builder the opportunity to create housing that's on that lower end of the housing price point. With, as I understand it, again, you'll have to forgive me, I'll confess plenty of ignorance on this, but it's my understanding there's a 140-foot frontage requirement presently. That makes it pretty difficult, I think, for a builder to make, a 2 or 3 bedroom single-story home on a lot size like that and make it pay for the builder. So smaller lot sizes as an option is one thing we're looking at. We'd also like to look at working with the planning board to consider an overlay district, along our main corridor, College Highway to look at a commercial residential area where affordable housing can be promoted through the use of simultaneous construction of commercial ventures. Storefronts on one floor, affordable units on the second floor, for example. And lastly, a third option is to relook at I believe it's called the Inclusionary Bylaw that was established several years ago, where I think it's greater than a 10-unit development requires an affordable unit inclusion in that. We haven't seen much progress as far as affordable units being created based on that bylaw. I think by any measure, if the purpose of that measure was to promote the building of affordable units, it's failed. So I think we need to relook at that and reconsider that. So those are the three kind of 30,000 foot, not knowing a lot, frankly, from a housing authority perspective. I won't speak for my other housing authority colleagues, but I'll speak for myself in saying I'll acknowledge plenty of ignorance, but we do have a lot of energy and desire to want to move toward a Southampton that includes greater representation on differing housing stock price points.
Thank you, Jim. At this time, we're going to ask Larry Smith, our board consultant, to weigh in on this. And I think we all know, those of us that were familiar with the inclusionary zoning as it was adopted years ago, we pretty much knew, I think, when it was adopted, that it wasn't going to fly very, very far. We had several builders, developers come out about the issues with that. So I'm certainly not surprised it didn't go anywhere, but I'm asking now, rather than beat that dead horse, and we'll have to revisit that someday, what we can expect going forward, what we can hope to create and revise this law somehow. So Larry, go ahead.
This is a conversation that we had at a planning board meeting about a year ago. And Ryan was at that meeting also. And we were talking about affordable housing, and everything in that survey was great. And it's probably the same answers that probably any other town around us who took a survey would say. There is a huge problem in the state. It's a housing shortage. It's not just an affordable housing shortage, it's a housing stock shortage. By having a housing shortage of non-affordable housing, that just drives up the price of everything. And that's where we sort of are now. We just went through a housing acquisition process with my son. And it's unbelievably competitive. The prices are going through the roof. The realtor that he had had a potential buyer for a house in Amherst. They bid $35,000 more than the asking price, and they didn't get it. So right now it's an unbelievably competitive market, and it's a competitive market across the whole gamut for housing incomes. When you're talking about affordable housing, and I've done a lot of this, it's difficult. And it's difficult to make housing less expensive because it pretty much costs what it costs. Land costs what land costs. Lumber costs what lumber costs. Contractors cost what contractors cost. And it's difficult to work through just those numbers to make a price of a housing unit less expensive, which is why most affordable housing projects are done through some sort of a subsidy program. So I'm going to just ask quickly, I'm not really that familiar with the Southampton Housing Authority. Sound like you're really new. Do you have any units?
So the Southampton Housing Authority has some rental units. The town of Southampton, let me correct myself, has some rental units in the affordable range. They're not administered by the Southampton Housing Authority. They're administered by DHCD through Wayfinders out of Springfield.
Right, they have Section 8 certificate.
Correct. We essentially have no owner-owned affordable units in Southampton.
Okay, so your authority doesn't have any projects because I'll say most authorities, but when you have an authority, there at one time, and I'm not sure if there still is, was funding from DHCD to housing authorities to develop affordable housing. There are federal programs that are available or that were available. A lot of these programs dried up as the economy tanked back in the from 2008 back during that time period. They have not been brought back up to the funding that they were at that time or prior to that time. So there are a couple of things that you can deal with for making it affordable. One is through some sort of a subsidy project, and that's how most of them are done. When you're dealing with any kind of affordability issue, what you typically run up against or have to deal with is the density issue. The way to make it more affordable is to allow for more developments or more units to be developed on that particular parcel. You made the comment about the lot sizes being too large. You noted a number of neighborhoods that I'm not familiar with. My guess is, and as you mentioned, they are probably pre-existing non-conforming lots. The real determining factor there, and they're probably somebody who should be in on this call, is the Board of Health. Because when you're dealing with lots that aren't serviced by public sewer and public water, density is a real issue. Because you have to have your well set back 100 feet from your septic system, which has to be set back 100 feet from your neighbor's well, which has to be set back 100 feet from their septic system. So to a certain extent, you can't really configure that with all those houses having on-site services when the lots are less than an acre to an acre and a half. So when you're talking about trying to reduce the lot size as the answer when you're dealing with on-site, which is what much of Southampton is, you're dealing with some Board of Health issues. Now, I have worked where we tried to develop a model to allow for shared septic systems, where a development could have one really large septic system to service all the units, which would allow you to put in a cluster development and bring down the infrastructure costs and the like. And even though the state environmental affairs or DEQE says that they permit them, it's really, really difficult. And even though they say they permit them, they have not been permitting them out in this part of the state. Which is unfortunate. We had an experience, and you do have an inclusionary zoning bylaw. It was based on a model that was developed by the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. When it was adopted by Southampton, it did something to it that now renders it unusable for the most part. I was working in the town of Hadley about 5 years ago, and they also have an inclusionary bylaw. And they also luckily have public utilities with sewer and water. And they, in fact, did under their inclusionary bylaw permit a condominium project. And the condominium project was, in fact, setting aside X number of units as affordable. And in their bylaw, the responsibility for administering those units fell by the bylaw fell to the Hadley Housing Authority. When the bylaw was developed and adopted, nobody bothered consulting with the Housing Authority as to whether they wanted to do that or not. So, but the bylaw was adopted anyway. So when it came time to for the developer to meet with the Housing Authority to talk about the administration of these units, the Housing Authority said, we don't want to. You know, we don't want to take responsibility for those. We have our own Housing Authority affordable housing project that we're administering, but we don't want to take on any more. Reason being, it costs a lot of money to administer these units. and I can't say I have this for firsthand information, but I was told during the conversation, the discussion on this project with the Housing Authority, that the Housing Authority actually contacted DHCD, and DHCD told them that they shouldn't be administering these other units from these private developments, because that's not what DHCD funds the authority to do. So what I did do was, we did a couple of things. We had the brainchild that at PVPC, we will get a number of planners in the agency certified to administer affordable housing, because it really is a huge project. If you don't have the in-house capability to administer it, which basically means hired staff, it's really difficult for you to take responsibility for administering affordable housing units. It's even more difficult with ownership than it is rental. So we went through, there were 5 of us that went through the certification process. We were all certified. And we concluded that for what we would have to charge the developer or the town to administer the units, it just really wasn't cost effective for the amount of time we would have to put into it. So in Hadley, what we did, and I'm going to suggest that at some point, I think we should do this with you folks, is we had people, some people from the Hilltown CDC come in. Because the Hilltown CDC does develop affordable housing projects, and they also administer the management of affordable housing units. And so we had them come in, and my hope was that essentially the town would be able to contract with Hilltown CDC to, in fact, take over the administration of these non-housing authority affordable housing units. And I thought they were really competent. I thought they knew what they were doing. And I don't remember the exact number, but I think they were talking about charging tens of thousands of dollars per unit to administer them. And that's not a crazy number, unfortunately. I really wish it was, but it's not. But I think that is one entity that you really should be talking to. And if we have a subsequent meeting like this, I would love to extend to them an invitation to come in and participate in it, because they have a real wealth of knowledge in terms of the complexity of administering affordable housing units, but also what they can do to help you in that endeavor. So I'm going to stop there with that right now. I mean, affordable housing is an incredibly difficult, complex, but universal problem. And it's not just Southampton. It's I think every community that I've worked with. I'm really happy to see that you want to take a proactive stance to do this. I think that's hugely positive. But I think before we start looking at specific alternatives like overlay districts and things like that, we have to come up with a way for the community to administer the units. There are ways of developing affordable housing trusts. That's one thing we were looking at while we were in Hadley. I think that's an area where half of the members wanted to go that route. There are a lot of towns that have that, but again, it's expensive. It's not inexpensive.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
You said a lot of things, so I want to just summarize. Are you really saying it's almost like there's 2 problems? One, how do you build the affordable house? And then how do you manage the affordable house? Does that?
Yes, that's correct. Because when you develop an affordable housing unit and you want it to qualify, to be sanctioned and approved by the state and apply towards, hopefully get to your 10%, there's a process they have to go through. And the real problem is the length and the degree of work it takes to get tenants and subsequent tenants for those units, especially relative to home ownership units. Because, in fact, you are ultimately responsible for that. And there's a reporting requirements that the community has to do to the state. And it is intense. But it's not, unheard of. It's just you really need to I think it's not for the layperson. You need to hire somebody who knows what they're doing and can do it for you.
At this time, I'm going to ask, thank you, Larry. Ryan, could you, from your perspective, from a builder developer, give your side of some of the hoops you have to jump through on this?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So there's a couple different things going on. I mean, since the inclusionary bylaw, I think it's been, what, 6-7 years, roughly, something like that. You haven't seen any subdivisions over the 9 because it's extremely difficult. So you need large tracts of land, and let's use Red Brook as an example. I think there's 28 or 32 houses in there. So parcels of that nature, you could do an affordable, and the numbers would work in the affordable aspect. But if you find a tract of land that's maybe a 12 or a 13, with the infrastructure cost and the cost of building, it just never seems to jive. And there's always that stigmatism of someone wants to come in and move into the neighborhood and they want a certain look, a certain feel, and you have that affordable, which we all know you can't build an affordable house. I mean, you're building it at a loss. You're not going to build a 3,500 square foot house to match a neighborhood of all the other 8 or 10 or 12 houses and have to give it away at the affordable. If you look at the calculation on the HUD, it's pretty low. And the other item is in town, just the cost, the sheer value of the raw land in this town, what it's worth. You know, we don't have, I looked in example like Granby or Belchertown or towns like that. I mean, in Granby, there's 10 building lots between $42,000 and $65,000. I haven't seen a building lot in Southampton for sale for that price or even a transaction in a very long time. I mean, I think the most inexpensive lot in town is like $90,000, and that's a tough lot with a lot of infrastructure costs. It's this town, East Long Meadow. There's a few other towns. It's extremely hot market for real estate. And, you know, like my project, I'll use mine for example. I couldn't get any more than the 8 lots that I got. So if I could have, I had to look at and weigh those options. But if I was at the threshold, if I could have gotten 10 and I was at 9, then would I increase the lot sizes? Because it's like the wants and needs of what people are looking for. I mean, the other items that affect the affordable, because we work on these projects and in all different communities, we don't have public transportation and the sewers, that's going to be the biggest thing. So the example of that neighborhood of Mountain View, great idea, great concept, but I just looked it up. All those lots are less than half an acre. And like Larry had said, yeah, so you've got some wells, but you've got town water. But I can tell you, you take that lot, put a house on it, a 1-car garage, a shed, maybe an above ground swimming pool. You've got like 2 places to put the septic system. And over time, a system's going to fail if it's 20, 15, 25 years, and you're going to have to go to the reserve area to replace. I mean, so if you're looking long-term, 50, 60, 70 years, you might have to go to 3 different spots to put the system in. You could dig it out, replace it in kind, but, you know, that's not the most cost-effective way to do it. I personally think, I mean, there is a want, there's a need, but there's also something I just came across with talking to a realtor last week. There's a group out of the Midwest. They're doing 55 over apartment complexes. They've done a couple in Connecticut. They've done some in New Hampshire, which I thought was an interesting concept. So, you know, I looked at is there's that 55 over, and is that a way to achieve some of the affordable? Because I read Cindy's spreadsheet, and I agree. If you get to a point of retirement and you're an empty nester and you're on a different income, you know, what's what's affordable. I mean, HUD has a definition of what affordable is in town and their regs, but really what is, I mean, I have my definition of affordable is not the calculation that HUD has. So it's like, it's sewers. I mean, I would say that's 70% of your holdback, because you could do an apartment complex, do a mixed use. There are parcels and tracts of land that are close to the corridor of Route 10 that would work. But once you put that many units, like Country Garden Apartments behind Cumberland Farms, you get into a septic system, you basically are creating a wastewater treatment plant. So you're triggering, it's not a septic system anymore, it's a wastewater treatment plant with a manager. It falls under different regs. I mean, it takes it to a whole different level, and it's a whole different cost structure on that.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the things, we are working on our zoning, as I'm sure Cindy has probably mentioned to the authority, your group at some point, is that we have talked about going with mixed use development along that section of the highway that is serviced by water and sewer, to allow for mixed use and for higher densities. Doesn't necessarily require or get into the specifics of affordability. But if you're talking about higher densities, that's in that type of use, that's probably almost the only place in town you can do it.
So a question to Ryan, if I may, Paul, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Ryan, I'm sure you represent all the developers in town, so you can answer this, but why, what is the lack of attractiveness of doing just exactly what Larry just said? You saw in the survey that many people are looking for the one story, the one level living, or they're 55 or older. They're not necessarily looking for an apartment. They're perhaps looking for a condo, or I'm not even going to go to the assisted living level, but just a different place than the 4-bedroom home with the 2 or 3 bathrooms that they don't need anymore, and the big yard that they don't want to have to mow the lawn anymore, but they're looking for something else. Why is it that developers are looking, we're not hearing about any of that potential happening in the area of our town, which does have the public sewer?
So the problem is it goes back to the sheer cost of the raw land. So if you wanted to build, let's use for an example, a 1,500 square foot 3-bedroom ranch with a 2-car garage, and if you wanted to go into a subdivision type area of, let's say, Bissonnet or Fitch Farm, Gill Farm, one of those, I mean, there's no secret. It's on MLS. The lots on my project were 138,500.
Yep.
And 7 out of 8 of them are sold as we speak right now. And you can't, and to build a house of 50, you're upside down before you start. The land is too expensive to build a small house. Because what you're not, the bigger the house, the more expensive the land, the numbers work better. You're going to be overpaying essentially for what you're getting for a house because what you're paying for the land.
But I'm asking about something more local to the central part of our town. Is there just nothing to no place to develop it? Is that part of the problem?
You've only got, I can think of 2 parcels that are 2 or 3 parcels that are on Route 10 that are of size of that are not wet, that are in size of greater than 5 acres. And I think it's owned by, the 3 parcels are owned by 2 different individuals.
And the other issue you have is that, and it kind of gets to Ryan's point, which is, you have such a limited area that has sewer and water available. Well, that's also what that type of retail and commercial development needs. And that's something, again, that the town is trying to promote, to broaden its tax base. It's commonly understood that commercial and industrial and retail uses pay more in taxes than they consume in services. which is typically not the case when you're dealing with residences. So you have a little bit of a push-pull in terms of you have this limited area for limited capacity for sewer and limited capacity for water. How best to utilize that in the long-term interest of the community? And I think that's where we sort of thought that the mixed use was probably not a bad idea, allowing the commercial office retail on the first floor and then putting multifamily up on the upper stories.
Yeah, and that's still a possibility, correct?
Yes.
All right, now I have a question. CPC funds are available for affordable housing, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, with that?
CPC funds are available for affordable housing, correct?
That is
Correct.
one of that is one of the categories that gets an automatic 10% set aside every year. Yeah.
Okay, so with this, and I'll direct this at Ryan, say for instance, CPC bought a tract of land, all right? So that takes the land acquisition out of the equation. Does that help matters at all?
I mean, yeah, there's multiple groups out there, the TCBs, the Valley CDC, Beacon Developers, all these groups all over that come in. And I mean, I've worked on these projects. I've seen these projects. It's in Amherst and Holyoke. They're in all multiple different towns. Easthampton has it. But I can tell you 99% of them that I'm aware of, it all goes back to sewer because they put a cost analysis together. I mean, building the unit is so much a square foot. The earthwork and the site development is always the biggest wild card. And if you can hook up to a sewer and your connection fee is $100,000 and it costs $50,000 to run the pipe, you're $150,000. If you got to build a wastewater treatment plant for that same facility, that's 1.2 or 1.5 or 900,000. It shows it throws that all off. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest because why is it the model is we're in an area and we're almost like we're on an island where it's happening in Westfield, Holyoke, Easthampton, Northampton, Amherst, Hadley. What are all the common denominators? There's all sewers, Chicopee. And why is it not? I mean, Westhampton has one little small senior type housing or 55 over, but why isn't it happen Southampton, Westhampton, like the hill towns? Because it goes back to the sewage issue. I mean, Huntington, you have sewers in certain sections. So you have apartments, you have, the density. I think there's a couple housing projects up there.
All right. So doesn't that suggest then, going by what you just said, that the areas that would be prime for possibilities would be something close to the Holyoke border or Easthampton? Westfield's out of the question because you told us time again that the connection there getting to the Southampton side from Westfield would not be that easy. But anything, say, along the Holyoke border off of County Road or Route 10 College Highway close to the Easthampton borders might be the prime areas to focus on.
Well, Easthampton, Holyoke, no. Holyoke, you got to build a pump station to get into Holyoke. You're not doing that. The easiest
don't they have sewer along? Does Holyoke have sewer along County Road?
No, that's all septic.
Easthampton has sewer on Line Street from is it Cook Road down to the substation. I'm drawing a blank on the road. Down by the dentist office, by Cullington's old office. There's sewage in there.
Garrett Court?
Yep. So it goes into capacity. I mean, you have to look at, right, Paul? You do the calcs on your capacity and what the wastewater treatment plant will handle. And
so,
go ahead.
Yeah, that's a big discussion point. And I talked with Easthampton town or city engineer about that, specifically about their capacity. So the Route 10 corridor, that that's approaching capacity on Route 10. So basically anything that comes on Route 10 into like Big Y and Red Rock, that's at virtually at capacity. There is, however, available capacity on the bike path that is coming off onto Coleman Road. So they do have, actually not Coleman, but Wemco
Way.
Yeah. So I believe there's a dead end there that could be connected. Now you're talking about running, how many thousands of feet, hundreds, thousands of feet of new sewer. That's a huge cost there. But to me, it seems like that's the most, that part of the Easthampton side of Southampton is probably the most reasonable opportunity zone, right? I mean, you're not going your else in town to run sewer and chase it back for treatment.
Jim, what's your opinion after hearing all the issues going forward to try to create this?
So I took notes best I could. I do have a number of things I want to respond to. I guess first, before I even look at my notes, I would encourage the board and the guests present to resist the temptation, because we actually discussed this, Cindy's aware, in the Master Plan Implementation Committee. We looked, and Paul, I think you called in on one of our meetings explaining to us the challenges of sewer in town, and even where you have sewer in town on the Easthampton line, the fact that you have to get buy-in from Easthampton and you have to provide them with a fee and et cetera, as I recollect. I would caution the planning board and those guests present to resist the natural temptation when we think about affordable housing, to think about big units, large complexes that require, in Ryan's terms, their own sewer plant. I appreciate those thoughts, but that's not necessarily what I'm suggesting.
Okay, then what I'm
suggesting is that we look at, for example, the cost of land was cited as a barrier. We do have CPC funds. We actually have quite a bit of CPC funds. So certainly I've got to think, for a builder, if the land is purchased, that's going to have a significant influence on their bottom line as far as whether they can make money or not.
Are you suggesting you donate the land?
Exactly. Right.
That would certainly change the economics for a developer.
Yes. I would also, again, going back to looking at zoning changes, most of Southampton, or certainly along the corridor, actually, we don't have sewer in town, but we have water. We're right. We're not Westhampton or Chesterfield, where they're all wells, but we have a significant water infrastructure in town. So it's the septic, and I don't know the regs around this, but it's not like we have to keep our septic a certain distance from our neighbor's well when we have water. So I think there's potential there. The example given that, if you have a lot that's too small and you have a garage and you have a shed and you have a pool, there's no place for the septic, or these septics fail. I would counter that by saying the Mountain View Circle development is at least 50 years old, probably much older. Same with Lynn Drive and Karen Lane. As far as I know, they're not having a rapid failure of their septic systems in that area. They seem to be functioning fine. Those seem to be models for smaller lots, especially when you have water available working. There's potential there. Just by looking, just by observation. I would also like to remind folks that there was an example like, how do you make an affordable unit fit a neighborhood where there's other units that are different size? I believe you can accomplish that by looking at creating a duplex within that affordable unit. So if you have a cluster of 8 homes and they're larger, 2,500, 3,000 square foot homes, the affordable unit could actually be a duplex that could be built and designed to very much look and fit the neighborhood, but it has 2 dwellings inside it. So it has the appearance of the other larger homes, but it meets the affordable criteria, for example. So I think there's possibilities there.
Oh. Yeah, keep in mind.
If I could finish, just sorry. And I would also like to remind folks again that one of the things we're doing as a housing authority is we're really trying to, we definitely want to work with builders and everyone in town. So I would caution again, while we want to create affordable units as defined by HUD, we also really want to create a greater diversity of housing price points, i.e. the neighborhoods I keep citing, Lynn Drive, Karen Lane. Those probably wouldn't make, we could designate some as affordable, but many of those units wouldn't be considered affordable, but they would be housing units, housing stock in town that could house some people of differing income sizes than what we currently house with our new homes in town. So I'd like the board to remember that too, that we're looking at a broader spectrum than just affordable as defined by HUD.
So would that be like requiring a developer to build a smaller house?
It would be giving the developer an opportunity with smaller lot size to, on a certain acreage, you had sufficient space. You're developing, I don't know, I'm not a builder, 6, 7 acres. You could build 5 2,500 square foot units, or maybe you build 8 or 9 smaller units on smaller lots.
Well, Ryan, I'll leave that up to you. Crunching the numbers on that.
That triggers, don't we have a cluster housing bylaw, Paul, I believe? So we've kind of already touched on that item. And I just, for point of clarification, maybe I used the wrong word, but as far as for fitting in homes to meet the neighborhood, yeah, a duplex, it could be a larger house. Yes, I'm on board. I mean, we got to keep in mind too that 99% sure any 2-family triggers a special permit. Also, it's not permitted in any zone unless it has a special permit.
Yeah,
right. I think for me that's why we're here, is to look at options. If we have existing bylaws or whatnot that restrict what we're trying to do, let's look at those.
So, we just had a special permit on a duplex, right? Within the last few months on Pomeroy Meadow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, you are correct.
And is that going to be, maybe affordable isn't the right word, but is that going to be a different price point, to Jim's point? Are they going to be able to have people buy their side of the duplex at a reasonable cost? Do we know that? Is that builder thinking that when he proposed the duplex? Maybe we don't know.
The two lots went for like 135, didn't they?
Yeah.
135 to 140 is a lot alone, even though there's 2 units on it.
I mean, the market's going to determine that.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
I think that's some kind of an affordable restriction contained in it. The market's going to kind of drive what the price is going to be.
I couldn't agree more. I think the way we help the market is with CPC funds, we either, or a combination, we're able to purchase lots, or our CPC dollars go further if we can look at means to reduce that lot size so we can put smaller affordable units on a similar size space that currently would require only 1 unit. And maybe as a town, we look at, if we want affordable or varying price points in town, If we're going to grant a zoning bypass or whatever for a duplex, then that duplex has to meet certain criteria. You know, the town, if the town is giving something to allow, for example, a duplex to be built, should we as a town require something in return?
What?
Affordability.
How? You going to dictate what the sale price has to be? Or the rental has what the rental price has to be?
Well, if the town, well, why would the town then grant a duplex? Why? I'll ask you that question.
Increase the housing stock.
Of price points that the town desires?
Don't know. The town doesn't set the price.
Right, but does the town, but what is the town looking for, sir?
By what? By duplexes?
No. What do we hope to have in town? Do we increase the diversity of price points? Is that something the town wants?
According to the survey, yeah.
Right.
And
it's not strictly an economic argument.
I think if you ask, well, it does come down to an economic argument.
It always comes down to an economic argument and a supply and demand argument.
Which drives the economics of it.
So my
unless you're going to be getting in with some kind of a subsidy program,
right?
Which I support. I work with many friendly 40B projects that were funded through state or federal programs or housing credits or whatever that in fact did provide many units of affordable housing, and it's family housing. Somebody was talking about the 55 and older. There was a period where that's the only thing that towns were allowing to be built. And so the funding sources started saying, look there's more out there than just seniors that need affordable housing. It's family housing that you have the real shortage of. And so that's what they really kind of wanted to start trying to, the type of projects they started to want to try to promote.
Can I ask a question about, so if we had this property and we bought it with community preservation funds and we engaged with Habitat for Humanity to purchase or to build something, I don't really know how that works, but I mean, if it's not affordable to the builders in town, is that an option?
If you bought the property, what you would probably do is put out a request for proposals to developers or development type entities who develop affordable housing to submit proposals to develop that parcel. It probably won't necessarily be market rate developers or builders. It'll be people who do this. Clearly, providing the land for free makes a whole lot of difference in terms of the affordability of it and the economics of it. But you still need to go through a process to do it. And you ultimately still need to have the in-house capacity to administer those units once they get developed and once they're, put on the market. I mean, I can tell you,
Larry, and because they remain that way in perpetuity, correct?
Not necessarily perpetuity. There are many programs. I know that in Northampton, there was a real problem where, God, it must have been back in the 90s, where a whole bunch of the affordable housing projects, the time was running out. And at some point, once the clock stopped, those suddenly became market rate. So the state had to come in and renegotiate with all those developments to continue them for a longer period of time.
But if it's managed by the entity that's still undetermined here, is it devolve upon them to keep those affordable going forward?
Well, that's sort of the problem, and where the administrative capacity comes in, because it's going to be up to whoever that entity is to ensure that, in fact, for the resale or the re-rental of those properties, that they go through the right process and they are, in fact, rented to or sold to people of that particular income group. Which is why I encourage you. I would try to have somebody from the Hilltown CDC come in. I mean, they've done projects A lot of them have been, old mill rehabs, but they've been in like Goshen, Huntington, West Hampton, Chesterfield.
So we have met with them, Larry, just so you know. We met with them a year ago.
The Hilltown CDC?
Yeah.
Did they tell you what they would charge per unit to administer them?
No,
We didn't get that far.
we don't know yet. I don't know that we
Right.
got that.
Is Hilltown cover this area and not Valley CDC?
Neither one of them covers this area. Southampton is in this void. It's not covered by Hilltown. It's not covered by Valley. But
They're both willing.
Yeah, they're both willing, but we're not in their jurisdiction.
Right.
Officially.
Right, but that's kind of their choice.
Any other comments? It looks like there's a lot of homework here to do. It's been a great discussion. I've learned a lot.
I have a comment,
Go
a
ahead,
question,
Cindy.
actually, to my friends, Jim and Janet, who are working really hard on this, and I see Mr. Konecki on here too. I think it's great. But I am concerned about one thing. One day, the director of the Council on Aging called me and asked me to give a ride to an elderly gentleman who lived in the one right behind the Cumberland Farms. He needed a ride to the doctors, which I was happy to do. And we just chatted for a minute. This gentleman was not from Southampton. He'd only lived in Southampton 2 months. He needed a living space. He was in his 80s. I'm concerned that as we move forward on this, I don't know that you're going to have any mechanism to limit who gets these units. We would love very much to support people who are long-term residents of Southampton. I don't know if that's going to be in your application. Are you going to say you have to have lived in Southampton for so many years or family? I just don't know if you've considered that one part.
I think I can answer that, or at least partially. We have considered that, and I'm pretty sure that once you involve federal funds, that you cannot discriminate against residents. So I don't think if we create, whether it's senior housing or affordable units, if we're involving federal funds, and we would if they were, quote, affordable under HUD, I'm pretty sure you can't restrict. However, I just saw an article where the town of Pelham was introducing some affordable housing, and they were reserving space for just townsfolk, not the whole thing, but I thought that was intriguing. So I admit I need to learn more about that. And to Larry's point, I think that's where you really get your money's worth when you have someone like, Hilltown or Valley CDC, someone who has the wherewithal and the knowledge to administer and explain that.
When we went through the certification process, there are in fact some programs, subsidy programs, that will allow you to give a local preference. But that's usually for the first round. And after that, it's open.
And they have to meet the criteria, which are pretty strict. I mean, I think Goshen, when they built their senior, it did kind of have left a negative taste in some of the people's mouth in Goshen, because a lot of the people that applied didn't meet the qualifications. So most of the units went outside of Goshen residents. And that's certainly something that we're very cognizant of, Cindy, as well. Thank you.
Right. And I also look at Westhampton Woods, which was developed privately, but for seniors. And so they could restrict. So there's a lot of models out there, apparently.
Yeah, I think the Hilltown did that one too.
But it's private. It's private, I'm pretty sure. It's not town.
Well, they listed on their website. So maybe they didn't do it, but they may be administering the units.
Right. I'm guessing you're right.
So going forward on this, is it the opinion that you should either ask Hilltown to come here or meet with Southampton Housing Authority or this committee again, or whatever, to then we've got to narrow down the possibilities that we have in my mind. in order to craft any zoning language or anything else going forward. So you've got to narrow down the possibilities that are going to be doable with the infrastructure we have. At least that's what I've garnered from this conversation.
Well, I would suggest that I see this as there's multiple opportunities, some of which I think if you're talking about administering affordable units, definitely you need to have CDC involved. But I'm not yet understanding. I think we could independently look toward an overlay district that would not force, but allow builders to build on smaller lot sizes, assuming that, the septic could be built because they have the water. That's not necessarily going to create an affordable unit as defined by HUD, but it could allow for the creation of smaller units that fit that lower price point tier. And all it would do was give a builder, a developer, an opportunity to look at a piece of land and say, how do I want to divide this up? Do I want to have, 8 smaller units or 3 or 4 larger units? What makes sense to me? To Larry's argument about the economics, it would give the builder that option, where right now that option doesn't exist because we have a lot size and it permeates throughout the entire town. So I'm wondering if we could tease that piece out that is independent of the issue with having someone administer affordable housing, because we're not really creating HUD affordable housing. We're giving the opportunity to build housing at a lower price point by introducing a smaller lot size.
Can I ask a question?
I think the market's going to drive that. I think that, when you're talking about the resale of those units, if you don't have some sort of a restriction on that, it's going to sell for whatever the market bears. And if there's still a housing shortage, which I don't see ending anytime soon, those prices are just going to get jacked up. So I'm not sure that without the restrictions on it, I'm not quite sure how you're going to have a really stable number of units.
So I would respectfully disagree, and this is why. Because the market ebbs and flows. I lived over on Lynn Drive, and I bought a house over there in 2007, and you know what that was. It was crazy. It was exactly what you're describing now. People were bidding each other during the open houses. I bought high and sold low. That's just the way it is. But what doesn't change, Larry, is the housing market ebbs and flows, but the size of the house and the size of the lot will always be, in comparison to other houses that are larger lots and larger square footage, more affordable. So what I'm talking about is creating a diversity of price point in town. And if you allow for smaller lot size, which can build a smaller home, you're always going to have that end of the continuum on the price point range, whether the whole market is high or whether the whole market is depressed. But without that, what we get in town is all our new units are on the higher end. We don't have an opportunity to create those different price points.
And why do you think that is?
Because we don't allow for small enough lot size that a builder can't make an affordable, a smaller home, 1-story ranch style house that can make money for them on a lot size that costs $130,000 because it requires 140 feet of frontage.
Right. But
Ryan, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point. The problem is it's supply and demand, and you're going to build, if the hot size and the hot house was a half acre, and we could do that in a 2,000 square foot ranch with a 1-car garage, that's what we'd be building. But the pendulum is swung, and you can look. I mean, I lived in town. Now I'm going to sound like that guy that's been here for so long, since roughly 86. So I'm not that old, but I can tell you that growing up in this town, the houses of my peers were not the 29, 32, 35, 37, 4,000 square foot house, 3-car garage, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody had an in-ground pool and this whole picture that is there. So it's definitely, the town has grown and it's changed, and the housing structure has gone with it, and that's the direction that it has. I'm on board with the smaller parcels and the smaller houses, but I think if you're trying to put it on this corridor, if we're going to use Route 10 as that, the parcels of land, there's like I said, there's possibly 2. I mean, a lot of this is built up and the property is used. So do we look at other areas of the town? I mean, can you go up towards the Fulmer Roads and Russellville and all those things? But you also got to keep in mind, a lot of farmland the development rights have been sold, right, and been protected. And I can think of like 3 or 4 large tracts, which would be great cluster housing or, developments. And you could do something like Mountain View Circle. But since the development rights have been sold, I mean, to get that back, I mean, the town probably would have a chance going through the state. But Larry, you could tell me, you've probably dealt with this more. It's literally an act of Congress to try and get it back.
Oh, it is. It takes legislative action and payback.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Larry.
No.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, to your point, I agree. I was thinking like an overlay district for a commercial residential along College Highway, but looking at an overlay district where you have the potential for smaller lot sizes could include the areas that's served by our water infrastructure, for example. So to the point that, we can have smaller lot sizes because we can fit the septic on the size and not worry about infiltrating our neighbor's well because we have water, for example.
Right.
You're right, though. I mean, this isn't going to be easy. To everyone's point, that neighboring towns really struggle with affordable housing. This town is a hot market because of where we're close to the major highways. So it's not like there's a lot of land available. I agree with all of that. I'm saying we need to try. And there's certainly been developments in town in the last 5 to 10 years. So it's not like there's no more development. So I think we need to try, and we need to think about what we can do as a planning board to give the opportunity, minimally the opportunity, if not create a restriction, but start with the opportunity for builders to consider smaller units on smaller lot sizes. That's not even a possibility, as my understanding it, with our current zoning.
I think one quick thing, Paul, and then I think if we do that, I think the biggest thing, like Larry had said, we need to focus on is who's administrating and overseeing, and I think if you don't have that in place or those guidelines, and I see sometimes things get, the carts before the horse, you could lose control of it really quickly or not have it, set up and geared in that direction.
You see me shaking my head, yes, because believe me, that's one of the things that worries me being on the housing authority is that I'm suddenly expected to be an expert to be able to administer these things. I find it very intimidating. I agree. But I'll remind folks, I'd like to break these thoughts down into different parts. And one thing that doesn't require any administration as far as affordable housing is simply looking at the potential for smaller lot sizes. And to Larry's point, let the market be. Maybe, to your point, Ryan, there's no market for those houses. Maybe not. But it's not even in the realm of possibility to expand our price points. Again, not talking about affordable as defined by HUD that requires an administration. I'm just talking about something less than 140 feet of frontage, something that gives a smaller, there could be lot sizes in town that are not buildable because they're too small, that if we looked at an overlay district that allowed a smaller lot, suddenly now as a builder, I can build a house there. It's going to be a small house, but that land was valueless because it was unbuildable. Now it is.
No,
Okay.
there's a market for it. You just, you know, the economics have to work.
So we've got to have a plan here, not to coin a phrase with planning board, but, you know, and I don't know whether to ask Larry and Jim or whomever, but there's got to be a plan in prioritizing what steps we need to take to get the ball rolling on this. And as Ryan said, if you don't have an administrative body, and Larry's echoed that, then that's the first part. But I mean, the zoning and the overlay and all the other factors, but you've got to put things in priority to get the ball rolling. And I'm not quite sure who's going to draw that list up, but whoever does will start to address it.
Well, Paul, I'll make a suggestion. Again, I think we can start as far as the people present here, the planning board, the housing authority, with looking at, for example, an overlay district that allows for smaller lot size. That does not require any administration. We do not need to have, because we're not necessarily making affordable housing as defined by HUD. We're just trying to look at smaller lot sizes, which would give the opportunity to build smaller homes. There's no administration there required.
No, I understand that. That's zoning issue. That's
Yes.
clear to me. The administration is from your end, and who's going to administer it after we develop this all, and the body that's going to be.
There's nothing to administer. There's nothing to administer. If, for example, you put a house, you have a lot in town that's not buildable because it doesn't have sufficient frontage. You create an overlay district that suddenly that lot is now buildable. A builder buys the lot, builds a house there, and sells it. There's nothing to administer because we're not making an affordable unit necessarily. We've given the opportunity for a piece of land to be developed that wasn't developable before.
And how do you know that particular piece of land is going to be affordable?
You don't.
No, we got it
without it being under the auspices of the housing authority. How is it going to be affordable?
And you don't even.
I don't know how to say this any clearer, folks. When I say I'm talking about price points. I'll use a different word.
You create
a small house on a smaller lot that's not a 3,000 square foot home. It's a smaller home. So it's more affordable, but it's not a HUD affordable home.
So what you're trying to do, Jim, is basically so let's say there's a 3/4 acre building lot in town and the required frontage is 140. It's got 128. Someone could come to, I mean, that would be a zoning with planning, but if you create it, I don't even know how you would do that, but basically create a bylaw of some sort that you come to the planning board or as housing authority. I found this parcel of land. It's basically a non-buildable lot at the way it sits, but you go to the Southampton Housing Authority. Hey, we have this parcel of land. We're going to build an 1,800 square foot ranch. It basically come with a plan. This is the price point. This is the story, et cetera, et cetera. You know, would you allow, a zoning variance in square footage? Basically, so the person that owns that land that's not a buildable lot could say, okay, this is now buildable through the housing authority, but they can only do X, Y, Z. I'll sell it for $50,000, so it drives it down from the 130, let's say, and the house is a little bit smaller. So then hopefully they build a house in a price point of $340,000, which is not by definition the HUD affordable, but it's more affordable than the 500 and up. but it's a great idea. It's a great concept. I could get on board with it. But Larry, I'm going to push to you. Like, I don't know how you, from a legal standpoint or a bylaw, how you would ever, you're kind of taking it case by case. I mean, you're taking something non-conforming and asking for forgiveness to make it conforming. I mean, I could see it could go one of two ways. You'd have a couple come in, or you'd have a stampede of people with lots, flag lots, you know, of what guidelines. Someone comes to you with a lot with 50 feet of frontage, but there's 2 acres in the back. I mean, how do you handle these? People start A&R in lots in a completely different configuration.
Yeah, one of the problems you have is when you get into trying to dictate the size of the unit, because there are various things in the zoning bylaw that don't let you do that. It also wouldn't prevent somebody from taking that small lot and putting a big expensive house on. It wouldn't prevent somebody from putting in a big lot and putting a big expensive house on.
So I'm wondering if, again, sorry, go ahead, Larry.
So, I mean, I get your whole thing about the price point. That is just really, you know, so hard to predict or to dictate, as opposed to doing a true affordable housing type project and doing true affordable, you know, affordable by definition units.
Right. It seems like they're both hard, is what I'm hearing. I don't think we should be afraid of the challenge. My point is, and maybe I can address your scenario, Ryan. I would propose, and this is where I need the planning board's help because it's my ignorance, but what you described, Ryan, is like a case by case, kind of almost like a ZBA situation. And I'm proposing an overlay district where there's no need to go to the housing authority or the zoning board. We've created an overlay district that now creates smaller lot sizes. And what was an unbuildable lot is now buildable. There's no approval, there's no appeal. It's now buildable. So as a builder, as the landowner, suddenly you've got a piece of property that's worth something. It's not as worth as, because it's not as big a lot. You can only put a big house on a small lot. I don't know, as a builder, I'm thinking, is that really going to sell? You still have to fit in your sewer and et cetera. We could build into the bylaw that if we're going to allow for smaller lot sizes, that to build on it, you have a restriction on square footage that you can build on it. I think that could be part of the overlay district expectation. I think that if, so again, you're giving builders on large pieces of land, you're giving builders options. How many units do I want to make? Do I want to make 10? Do I want to make 5? What's going to make me the most money? What's going to sell? On smaller pieces of land where it's currently not a buildable unit, a buildable lot, you give the opportunity for it to be a buildable. So working with the economics of it, to Larry's point, I feel that if we provide an overlay district that allows for smaller lot sizes, you actually increase the potential for economic development because you increase the possibilities of what you can build, both in larger lots in numbers and in smaller unbuildable lots, which are now producing minimal tax dollars. You can actually create a tax base because you're building a house where you couldn't before. And it's not to be administered because it's not affordable.
That is not a tax winner. Residential units consume more in services than they pay in taxes.
If that were true, we wouldn't do any more building at all in town. We would have a building moratorium.
No, you wouldn't.
Because I think, there are certainly
because you can't have a moratorium for that.
Right, but a town could choose if they wanted to make it so challenging for builders to build that no builder would through their zoning.
No, they can't. It's called anti-snob zoning. You understand? You deal with
I
zoning
don't
a
know
lot?
if I worked with Northampton very much, but they make it very challenging to build.
I was a planner in Northampton during the 1980s.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. No offense, but it's a different world now. My point is,
I live in Northampton.
as do most of my family.
Yeah. So I have a really good idea of what's going on in Northampton.
As do I, sir. I don't think we should be discussing Northampton here, though. My point is, I think that we can expand our opportunities for building. Doing nothing, which is what we've done now, is not creating opportunity for people to live in Southampton. We're very good at making $500,000 homes, and that's what we do. And to Larry's point, there's a lot of data out there that shows that the cost per foot of curb goes up. You build a house, you build your tax base, but then they bring in kids, that adds to the school. The streets have to be maintained, the streets have to be plowed. So the idea that more housing means more tax revenue for the town is a debatable discussion. So I don't think we want to go there. I think what we want to do is give opportunities to expand the housing price points in town. And I'm willing to go down that road to pursue that, because right now that's not what we're doing.
Jim, is the Southampton housing?
The firefighters, the police who work in our town, can they afford to live here? That's the question.
Jim, is the Southampton Housing Authority willing to assume some responsibility to take on that affordable housing issue and also manage it? I mean, if it can't be done by this other plan you proposed, are you saying that you don't want to propose it affordable housing in any other way, so your board does not have to have any management or administration?
No, I'm saying we take a multi-prong approach. So we look at overlay districts to reduce lot sizes, but we also look at affordable housing, which would require the administration, which would definitely be something we would have to consider contracting out and exploring that. Absolutely. We're too small of a housing authority. We're a volunteer board. I don't claim to have the skills and the wherewithal to administer town funds, and wouldn't want to, because I wouldn't want that responsibility without a lot of training. So to your point, Mr. Demon, I think if we start looking at the affordable, which we will, consult with Hilltown CDC, for example, we would definitely look at how do we administer that? How do other small towns administer? Yes, sir. We already are looking at that, exploring that. But part of the process is it's in addition to figuring out how to administer it and how to use CPC funds and leverage them to help make building affordable units affordable to people like Ryan, so it makes sense for them to do the work, is the restrictions we have in town as far as where we can build and what we can build on. With the current zoning of, again, 140 feet frontage required, it makes it even more challenging.
Larry, could you give us any scenarios, maybe for the next meeting or the subsequent meeting going forward, any scenarios on how we might approach the overlay or different areas in town where we might be able to create something here and rewrite the zoning?
We were going through and we were updating the zoning bylaw. I don't think you do have a cluster bylaw.
Yes.
So, that's something we will have to look at. I just think as we go through the bylaw and as we go through section by section, if we can work in or include a discussion on this topic, that's where you would want it to be integrated. I'm not sure you even need an overlay district.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Can you recommend you put some time into it, where you might conceivably have these opportunities.
Let me think about it.
Yeah, right. Not tonight.
Because it's a big project, and there are a lot of variables.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other comments, Mr. Kanicki or Paul Fergal or John Martin? Anyone else? Keith, anyone else want to weigh in on this before we move on with our next agenda item?
I just had one thought, Paul. We're talking about using CPA funds and buying the land and then using that to build a house on. Is there a possibility where if there's a house out there for $450,000, we could get somebody that meets the affordable housing standards and give them $100,000, let's say, from CPA funds in order to make it affordable and have under the contract that it has to stay that way for X amount of years. And that way, in some home they want to go into, but yet we can help them with CPA funds to keep it affordable and have a contract where you can turn around and sell it, tomorrow and make that $100,000.
Larry?
Yeah, there are.
From a builder's point of view, it'd be fine because they're not to do anything at that point.
There are communities that do use their CPA funds to underwrite loans, to pay for closing costs, things along those lines. But again, now you're getting into having to administer those units and ensure that they are, remain being resold or re-rented in the affordable housing range for the life of whatever that agreement is. So towns are doing that. But again, we kind of get back to the administrative capacity.
Anyone else with a comment?
I do have one question. Sydney, how can I get that presentation that you have? Is that something that can be emailed out or is it on the website?
Yeah.
I'll
send it over.
Well,
Okay.
and also it's going to be posted, or even today was posted on the town website.
Okay. It just, the font was really hard to read through the meeting.
Sorry. So Paul, do you want to email it to
Yeah,
him?
I'll send it over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else before I go on to the next meeting agenda item? And so we will now adjourn this portion of the joint meeting with the Southampton Housing Authority. Thank you all for your participation, and I'll wait to hear from Larry, and then I'll share his thoughts and see how we can do this going forward again. Fair enough?
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Sounds good.
Planning board.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate Paul and the planning board for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate your input and your education. I've got a lot to learn, so thank you all. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
It's not a problem unique to only Southampton.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not even a current problem. This has been going on for like 30 years. And it's there's no easy fix.
You're right. Or it would be done by now if it were easy. You're absolutely right.
I'm afraid that's true.
Yeah.
And what I keep getting back to is the feds and the state have to provide funding to underwrite these projects. That's really the only way that you can bring down the cost of the development to bring it down to an affordable rate.
But don't we have to find the property to get to them to do?
No, what you need to do is you find a firm or somebody who develops affordable housing. And there are entities out there that do that. That's what they specialize in. And I've worked with, a number of them, and they're terrific. And that's why, I call them a friendly 40B project. It's because it's a project that we like, we know we need it, and we're going to help them get that through the permitting process. And for 40B, who you aren't aware of it, it's a fast track permitting process for affordable housing projects.
Very good.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated.
Hey, Ryan, go to bed.
I am. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. I really don't have, there's no building permits, although there was one in the mailbox I didn't get today, but I'll take a look at it in the next couple of days. I believe it's for Fitch Farm. Gartzka is got a building permit in, so I don't see any problem with that not being approved, and I can sign off on that, but I don't have any other business unless there's reports to be made or inquiries. Cindy, anything from your standpoint?
I have two things, three things. First of all, the open space and recreation plan is really almost done. It is going to need a planning board letter of acceptance. And I have a sample letter. It's apparently going to be posted on the town website in the next few days, according to our consultant, Ken Comia. And so it's too soon for the planning board to approve it or accept it until you have an opportunity to at least view it. So I'm just telling you that probably the next meeting, I will give you that sample letter, and you've actually done this before in the past with the previous open space and recreation plans. That's one thing. Secondly, I want to just share one more slide that was presented last night at the joint meeting of Select Board and, hold on here. Can I open that? Yeah, there we go. This is the last slide. This was the joint meeting of the Select Board and the Planning Board. For those of you that couldn't come, these are the community priorities that came out of the survey. The first priority that was the most popular was right here: acquire land and complete the bike path for Sheldon's to be to the from Sheldon's to the Easthampton line. So that was the number one biggest vote getter for what the town would really like to see happen, even if it required a bond issue or an increase in property tax. That was the way the question was written. The next one, top vote getter, was develop a public utility to improve internet/broadband service that would generate revenue for the town. The next one, third one, was purchase land to preserve open space. Next one is pursue renewable energy generation such as solar or on town-owned land. And then down from there, develop bicycle paths and greenways that link open spaces, buy land to build a public safety complex was sixth, invest in public sewer and water provision in commercial areas, seventh, and repurpose existing municipal buildings for multi-use meeting and community center was the least popular. So all of this will be posted on the town website. This all has to do with land use. I'm not going to go over this right now. Maybe at another date if you want to talk about this, but I urge you each to go and sort of consume this whole thing that was presented by going into the town website, or Paul can email it to everybody if you'd like. So that was one thing, and that came out of the master plan implementation meeting. I'm not going to go on more about that now. It's late already. I do also want to raise one more thing, and that is that the Open Space Committee has been making contact with landowners of large parcels that are of potential conservation value. And we've gotten a couple calls from people who received a letter under my signature and inviting them to attend a free webinar that's provided by UMass Dan is very knowledgeable of the individual who's coordinated those webinars. He's a UMass professor, and Dan's been taking courses from him. And it's called Protecting Your Legacy. Well, there's one family that owns a very large parcel way up in the northern corner of our town, above the Ty Carmody in the watershed area. And here's a question that came up that I'm going to ask because I don't know the answer to it. They wondered, would it ever be possible to see the redevelopment or the reopening of the now old, unused Edwards Road? You know where that is? I know Keith knows. It's not too far from where you live, I don't think, Keith, up there.
That is now Quigley Road. A portion of that is now Quigley Road.
Oh, so that's the subdivision.
Yeah.
So it would like go off the end of Quigley and go up through the back end of Pellegrini?
That's all privately owned.
That's Pellegrini property up there?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's not 100% because it comes, as you've probably gone in through Westhampton. I did it the other day.
Yep.
Go up Laurel Hill Road, go take a left on that Edwards Road, and it comes to a dead end, totally
Yep.
dead. Okay, so it's essentially undevelopable. It doesn't matter what the planning board thinks. It's already mostly privately owned. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the answer. Thank you. I didn't know that. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have to say tonight.
Thank you. Dan, have you got any issues or questions?
No, I followed up again with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. I don't know why they had lost or had not been sending me those messages. So thank you for forwarding that along to me, Paul. But it seems to be straightened out now. They sent out a course or a lecture talking about actually one of the subjects that I think is very interesting, or people are interested on your survey, which was renewable power. So they were talking about how towns could go about producing municipal solar power. So maybe I'll attend to see if I can help with your survey.
Regarding your question about the trailer at 32 High Street, that's not something that this board is going to address. And
right.
If a neighbor or somebody from the public has a concern to refer that to the building, inspector for investigation, but that's not something I'm going to initiate through this board.
Okay.
Okay. That's about all I have. Paul, Keith, anything else from you guys? Thanks for hanging in there tonight. It was quite a lengthy discussion. It's daunting. It's listening to all the information, but all the uphill battles you got to fight to get to where you want to get there. It's maybe we'll arrive at something at some point in some fashion, but I don't know to what degree. But next meeting is December 2nd, and it'll be the continuation of 32 High Street, provided his engineer gets all the plans to us, and we'll go from there. And that's about it.
When is the Ms4 hearing?
We're going to discuss that hopefully at our next meeting.
Okay.
If everybody reviews it, because I'm not going to hold a public hearing until we discuss some of the concerns you people have, highlight it, and then we'll discuss it. And then after we're done with it, we'll put it out to public hearing. Patty emailed me the public hearing template. I just have to fill in the dates and the times and the Zoom information, but it's ready to go. But if we address this next meeting, then we'll put the public hearing on for after the first of the year.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everybody, and have a nice Thanksgiving. Stay safe with all your families and stay well.
Thank you.
As well.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Good night now.